And now I'd like to introduce Managing Partner for Bon Jovi Law Firm, Gina Bon Jovi.
Thank you very much, Danica, and happy Women's Month to everybody on the call. So let's talk a little bit about women-owned business certifications, although the certification process for women-owned businesses is very similar as it is for minority and veteran-owned businesses. So for starters, why would you want to go through the certification process? It can be a pretty rigorous process. There can be some expensive filing fees involved. So why go to the trouble? So as a small business, you are unlikely to get in front of buyers from humongous companies like MGM Mirage and Exxon, Texaco, AT&T, but they have these supplier diversity departments that seek out what are called DBES, which are disadvantaged business enterprises, which are those that are majority owned by minorities, women, veterans, LGBT, disadvantaged business enterprises. So the larger companies will have incentives to do business with these disadvantaged business enterprises, and so you have the opportunity to do business with some of the larger corporations you might not necessarily get in front of as a smaller business. So typically, as an overall principle, the way you qualify for these certifications is that you must be a for-profit business. Nonprofits are not eligible. And your business must have been in existence for more than 6 months. And it has to be owned, operated, and controlled, which can sometimes be, all three of those things can be different, by one or more women or the qualifying minority or a veteran, which sounds easy enough. But actually, the number two, because owning a business, operating a business, and controlling a business can actually be done by 3 different people or groups, you have to go to a lot of trouble to prove number 2. So let's kind of break down the owned, operated, and controlled part of that requirement. So number 1, a minimum of 51% of the ownership interest or stock in a corporation must be held by the qualifying minority. And for simplicity, I'll just refer to women-owned business certifications. Number 2, the company must also be controlled by a woman or group of women. So like I said, number 1 and number 2 are not necessarily the same thing. So you can have a woman who owns the majority of the ownership in a company who doesn't necessarily have any power over the company. Number 3, the woman in charge must have the requisite expertise, and I'll explain why that's important later. The funding for the business, the capital contributions, the money that came in the door to get the business started has to also be in line with ownership. So there is some suspicion among the certifying agencies when the influx of capital for a woman-owned business doesn't actually come from either a woman or the controlling woman in the company. They also look to whether legally binding instruments will have the woman's signature, and then that qualifying person must be a U.S. citizen or legal resident. So this application process is pretty strict because during the construction boom, especially here in Las Vegas, a lot of the general contractors who wanted to do business with the local governments and local large companies like the casino properties simply put their often, stay-at-home wives in the position of president of the company, put all of the shares in her name in order to qualify for these contracts. So what ended up happening is you had these contracts that were intended to be awarded to disadvantaged business enterprises that were being awarded to the same people who were qualifying originally. So that's why the certification process and the analysis process is so rigorous. And different certifying agencies also have varying requirements. There are some that are more strict than others. So let's go back to that same slide on what owned, operated, and controlled means. So I'm going to use as an example a client that I recently walked through this process. And they're a pretty large company, and they have a little bit more of a sophisticated legal structure. They're owned by a family limited partnership, and then they have an LLC that actually does all the business. And it's a family-owned company, so you have some, mom and dad and 3 kids, and one of the daughters is the one who's actually calling all the shots in the company. But trying to prove that to the certifying agency has been a bit of a challenge because of the sophisticated legal structure of the company. So number 1, 51% of the ownership interest or stock has to be held by a woman. That's relatively easy to prove. It's usually in an operating agreement, it's in your tax filings. If you're a corporation, it'll be in your shareholder agreement, but that's not enough. Again, the company also has to be controlled by a woman, which means they're going to delve deeper into your governing documents, into your operating agreement and your shareholder agreement to determine whether that woman who owns 51% actually calls the shots. They want to know that she can't be outvoted, that she can't be removed from the company for any reason by any of the other owners. They want to make sure that ultimately she holds the power over the decisions that are made in the company. Number 3, they also request your resume because they want to make sure that the woman who's in charge has the expertise to actually run the company, which is where a lot of the businesses, those general contractors, kind of failed this part of the test, that the resume did not reflect, a background in construction. So you have to provide your resume and often letters of reference from other people in order to verify that information. Number 4, I'm also running into trouble with another client whose funding for her business, she's a woman-owned business, but the funding has come from her significant other, who is a man. And so where you see funding, none of these are just positive. So if you fail one, it doesn't mean you won't get certified, but the agency will take everything as a whole, and if they see that your funding is coming from someone who's not actually the qualifying minority, then that pops up a question in their mind. Another thing is that those legally binding instruments have the woman's signature on them. So in the example of my larger company, she's not necessarily, the daughter who's running the show is not necessarily signing all of the contracts. She has people for that. She has minions for that. They're a very large company. But we run into trouble with the certifying agency that they want to see that she is signing off on those vendor agreements, on the insurance policies. She's one of, or at least the only signer on the bank account, things like that. And then, of course, the U.S. citizen and legal resident is an easy one. So with regard to the certifying agencies, there are several. And the guidance I give my clients about which agency's certification to pursue kind of depends on the goal. So I've had a few clients who are already doing business with, for example, the casino properties. They already distribute food or other services to the casinos, and they've recently gotten notices from MGM and Sands Corporation to say, if you want to continue doing business with us, you have to hold a certification. So in that respect, it's probably sufficient to go through one of the, I don't want to say easier, I guess less rigorous processes to get certified, which I would categorize the SBA's Women-Owned Small Business Certification Program, the WSOB, and the National Women Business Owners Corporation, NWBOC, as a little less rigorous than the third one you see on that list, which is WBES. So if you're already engaged in contracts, you're already doing business with certain companies, then the SBA or the NWBOC would probably be fine, because really all your clients want is to see that you've been certified. On the other hand, WBES, Women's Business Enterprise Council, is a national agency, and their certification process is very rigorous. It is a, all the skeletons out of your closet, pull your pants down analysis of your business. They want every document from the beginning. They want to track every single debt instrument. They want to see signatures on everything. It is very invasive, I would say. But the reason WBES is so successful is, number one, once you get a certification, you are able to use their seal, which is basically their logo that you can put on your RFPs and your proposals to different companies, and it's one of the more recognizable seals among these certifying agencies. In addition, they do a phenomenal job of providing support after your certification. So they have large conferences all across the country, both regional and national. And so once you are a WBES certified business, you end up in this fold of hundreds and thousands of other businesses that are all really trying to help one another out, and you can attend these conferences and you can take advantage of their professional development and educational opportunities. They really have that back-end support that I haven't necessarily seen with the other certifying agencies. So it kind of depends on where you're going with it. If you already have some business that you're doing, then I don't know that WBES is necessary, but if you're a brand new business or you're really trying to strike out and do some big things, then WBES is probably the way to go. So as I said, women-owned businesses are not the only certifiable businesses. So you also have minority-owned businesses that can be certified by several different agencies. One is the National Minority Supplier Development Council. We used to have an office for the Nevada office of the MSDC here, but that recently closed, I guess recently in the last couple of years. And the responsibility for Nevada certification has been taken up by an office, I believe, in San Francisco. It's more of a regional office. You also have the Small Business Administration 8A minority-owned, and the Department of Commerce has their minority business development agency certification. So obviously for minority-owned businesses, the trick here is to be able to prove that you are a minority and what minority group that you belong to. So sometimes that's easy, sometimes it's not so easy. We're talking birth certificates, driver's licenses, photo identification, genealogy sometimes, depending on what kind of certification you're going after. There's also some a little less often discussed certifications for Native American-owned businesses, which you have people even, with very small portions of their ethnicity as Native American, and trying to prove that ends up being a genealogical social experiment. And then we also have veteran-owned businesses. So you can be a veteran-owned business, you can be a disabled veteran-owned business, or you can be a service-disabled veteran-owned business. And most of those certifications are run through the Department of Veterans Affairs. You can start, a good place to start for those is vetbiz.gov. You can start educating yourself on what the certifications entail and how you register with the VA and how you get in front of some of those agencies for the government contracts. But you'll need your DD-214 form, and then if you are service disabled, you'll need the documentation for that. I do have to say that the service disabled veteran-owned business certification is probably the easiest one to get because the government has already declared the veteran nature of the applicant and the disabled nature of the applicant and whether the disability arose out of the service. So it's really a submission of two forms. It can be done online. You can create an account at vetbiz.gov, and it's relatively easy to obtain. So I've listed here some resources for small business, disadvantaged business certifications, the links to their websites, which all of their websites have a lot of information on what sorts of benefits you can enjoy if you go with that certification. It is not necessary to get more than one certification. You can just pick one. But be prepared, particularly for the woman-owned business certification, if that's what you're pursuing, that you have to pull the curtain back and expect to spend a lot of time digging up documents, and if you don't have documents in place, creating those documents to back up the ownership. All right. Danica, do we have any questions?
Let's see if we have any questions. This presentation, if you guys want a link to the presentation, feel free to just give Gina a call, check out this link here, or email the chamber, give us a call, and we're more than happy to send you this presentation. Doesn't look like we have any questions right now. If you want to ask a question, you can press *7 on your phone to unmute your line, or you can type it into the chat box in the bottom left corner of the screen. Well, if you have any questions after the end of this presentation, you can definitely send an email to Gina, give the chamber a call, and we'll put you in contact with her. I want to thank you guys so much for being on the call today, and thank you to Gina as well for joining us for Chamber University. Quick reminder, next week, Chamber University goes back to its regularly scheduled 10 a.m., and we will be talking about the importance of collecting feedback for your business with Shondell Newsom from Some New Marketing. So thank you again so much, and again, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Gina or the Chamber. Thank you.